If you were fired tomorrow for not finishing what you started today, would you still say you lack focus? Or would you just do it? Maybe distraction was never the problem. Maybe the problem is that quitting costs you almost nothing. And as long as it costs nothing, you'll keep calling it lack of focus. There's an elegant explanation for almost everything you start and don't finish. It's socially accepted. It protects your identity. It turns failure into something technical. You say you lack focus. You start studying, then stop. You begin a project, then abandon it. You attempt a new routine, and it collapses within days. And the explanation appears automatically. I get distracted. I just need better concentration. This narrative is perfect because it preserves your self-image. You're not irresponsible. You're not avoiding effort. You simply need to strengthen a mental skill. That sounds reasonable. We live surrounded by stimulation, constant notifications, infinite scrolling, competing demands for attention. So it feels logical to conclude that distraction is the central issue. Focus has become the defining skill of modern success. Without focus, you don't progress. Without focus, you don't produce. Without focus, you don't grow. So failure gets a clean explanation. It's not that you're choosing to stop, it's that you can't sustain attention. That distinction matters. One requires structural change. The other only requires continued effort. And effort feels safer. Picture something ordinary. You sit down to study. 5 minutes later, you check your phone, reply to a message, open another tab, search something irrelevant, stand up for water. 40 minutes disappear. Immediate conclusion, I can't focus. The same pattern shows up at the gym, in dieting, in remote work, in learning any new skill. You begin with intention, but intention doesn't sustain prolonged discomfort, and your environment constantly offers easier alternatives. Studying demands sustained cognitive strain. Social media offers instant gratification. Training requires physical discomfort. The couch offers comfort. The comparison isn't fair, so it seems obvious that the brain prefers distraction. And if the brain prefers distraction, the solution appears technical. Turn off notifications, use blocking apps, optimize your workspace, apply time management techniques. Many of these tools help temporarily, but something predictable happens. Even with systems, most people still quit. They still postpone. They still restart repeatedly, and they keep repeating the same explanation. I need more focus. This explanation survives because it protects something deeper than productivity. It protects identity. When you say, I lack focus, you're also saying, I want this, I'm trying, I just get distracted. That preserves the image of someone committed. It's socially acceptable. It's easier to admit you struggle with distraction than to admit something less comfortable. There may be no real consequence for stopping. Now consider a different scenario. You must submit a report tomorrow at 8 a.m. If you don't, you lose your job. No warning, no extension, no negotiation. Simple question. Would you struggle with focus? You might feel anxious. You might feel tired. You might dislike the task, but you are unlikely to scroll for 40 minutes. Now shift the scenario. You want to pass an important exam, but there's no immediate deadline, no penalty today, no tangible loss if you skip studying. If you don't study today, nothing happens. If you skip tomorrow, nothing breaks. If you postpone for a week, life continues. The difference between these two situations is not focus, it's consequence. In the first case, the cost of distraction is immediate and concrete. In the second, the cost is distant and abstract. The brain responds more strongly to consequence than to intention. You don't avoid touching a hot stove because of focus. You avoid it because of pain. When consequence is clear, behavior shifts instantly. What you call lack of focus is often the absence of cost. If stopping doesn't hurt now, the brain negotiates. If quitting carries no immediate loss, the mind rationalizes. It's not that you're incapable of sustaining attention, it's that you're not required to. And that reframes the entire issue. If the problem is focus, you can keep buying new systems. If the problem is consequence, you must change structure. And structure involves risk. Creating consequence means putting something real at stake. Money, reputation, public commitments, deadlines with penalties. That feels uncomfortable. It's easier to keep optimizing concentration than to admit you built a life where quitting is nearly painless. Because if quitting costs little, quitting becomes rational. There's another layer. If you accept that the real issue is lack of consequence, you must also accept that you could have acted years ago differently. That realization stings. It's easier to believe you're still working on focus than to admit you never created conditions where quitting was expensive. So the mind protects the ego. It keeps the focus narrative alive. It sounds technical, neutral, non-accusatory. It allows continuity without confrontation. The absence of consequence doesn't create dramatic collapse. It creates slow stagnation. You don't fail spectacularly, you simply remain where you are. The exam never gets passed. The business never scales. Your body doesn't change meaningfully. Income barely moves, not because you never tried, but because trying without cost for quitting creates a predictable loop. You start, you encounter discomfort, you realize stopping carries no immediate damage, you quit. You promise to restart. Time passes, and because nothing explodes, you normalize it. I'm working on it. I'm improving. I'm figuring things out. But the pattern repeats. Without consequence, intention becomes entertainment. The real cost doesn't appear the day you skip studying. It appears years later when you realize nothing structurally changed, and by then it has fused with identity. And identity is harder to confront than a missed deadline. Answer honestly. What actually happens when you stop? What is the concrete cost? Who loses something besides you? What is genuinely at risk? If the answer is nothing immediate, then perhaps focus was never the issue. Perhaps you structured your life to be too comfortable for change. Comfort doesn't demand concentration. It permits postponement. The real question isn't whether you can focus. It's whether anything compels you to. As long as there is no real consequence, your brain will continue choosing the easier path. Not because you're incapable, but because you can. That doesn't resolve the tension. It relocates it. And that may be exactly why calling it lack of focus felt safer. Because lack of focus sounds technical. Lack of consequence sounds like responsibility, and responsibility demands decision.